Welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Andrew Lee. I'm VP of Alliances and Channels here at Jitterbit, and I'm excited to be joined by Corey Willis, who's our Director of Customer and Partner Enablement. First of all, I want to give you guys a warm welcome. It is amazing the response that we got for today's webinar. We have over 500 people attending live this webinar. We're essentially going back to what seems almost an eternity ago. It's hard to believe it's only 2 or 3 weeks since the Salesforce Dreamforce event. It was the best Dreamforce ever. It feels like we say that over and over. For me personally, this was number 12. To actually see Salesforce put together over 165,000 people from around the world and bring together the level of conversation around innovative topics, from technology to equality, from the oceans to new platform technologies like platform events, was really amazing to see. When we go back and we do a quick recap of what we saw at Dreamforce, we've really tried to assess it over the last few weeks to understand, where are the needs happening within the Salesforce community around connectivity, integration, and APIs. And we drew all of this from over 10,000 conversations that we had with you, our existing customers, new prospects, and a lot of Salesforce customers who simply were looking for ways to connect Salesforce to the rest of their companies. We delivered over 200 live demos at the show. We were both in the big expo. A lot of you came and met us at the developer zone, where we got a lot more technical with you. We even met a lot of you at the nonprofit organization. And of course, we had multiple suites over at the Marriott. And from those conversations, we learned a lot. And what I can tell you is the world of integration and the world of Salesforce constantly changes. And in order to make this jump into digital transformation, it's not enough to just rely on what you get from Salesforce. While still the most amazing cloud platform and suite of applications, it's a growing and decentralized world. And that's exactly what we're going to cover today. Now, what were the key themes that we heard from Salesforce? I was amazed at the power and the energy that they have put behind the Trailblazer and the Trailhead initiative. Salesforce now realizes that they have an amazing amount of complexity in their platform, an amazing amount of power through their applications. And the most important to them is really being able to teach and educate everyone within the Salesforce ecosystem about the new technologies, about the new innovations, and about how to make this jump into this new digital world. And of course, they've made it fun, they've made it exciting by really rolling out and really centralizing everything at Salesforce around that Trailhead organization. And that was a really, really powerful theme that we saw for a second year in a row. Now, from a technology perspective, there were a number of key technology announcements that we heard from Mark when he was up on stage, but we also heard across all of the sessions and all of the keynotes. Of course, Einstein was everywhere, and that's no surprise. We're taking the world's best cloud automation platform and we're fundamentally making it intelligent. And it's exciting to see what the folks at salesforce.com are doing as they infuse artificial intelligence and analytics into every single application and every process delivered by the organization. We talked earlier about the Trailhead really being able to get out hundreds of different courses, and now I believe they're even moving into thousands of those courses. And it was interesting to even say that they could now allow you as an organization to bring Trailhead to your own organization and really use the foundations of their training platform within your own company. Their new user interface, Lightning, is really starting to gain momentum. After about 2 years now of slowly growing and working out some of the kinks in that new usability framework, it was exciting to see how many people are moving to Lightning. And of course, with Jitterbit, we've been working with the Lightning program for over 18 months. Anything that we connect with Salesforce, of course, works with that new UI. IoT definitely took another step. We saw the announcement of the IoT cloud about 1 year ago. We thought, are these guys going to be a giant IoT company? And they were much more clear with their strategy about saying how they would connect with the largest IoT platforms in the world and really become an engagement platform that is able to, in real time, deliver customer actions like proactive service or upsells or cross-sells based on the signals that they receive from IoT. And we at Jitterbit were very happy to be able to work together with them to be able to deliver that dream, specifically in delivering pre-built integration to the Microsoft Azure IoT platform and then connecting back to Salesforce. Of course, we see a lot of work around productivity with the team from Quip, and of course, we can see some of that leadership from Quip now taking over all of products at Salesforce. So a lot of great announcements, a lot of new technology. I would be remiss if I didn't mention from an integration perspective, the biggest announcement that we saw was the new platform events technology. For those of you who are familiar with how they do real-time integration at Salesforce, Salesforce, of course, provides one of the industry's best APIs in order to connect with. But an API is simply a window into the application. It doesn't move any data, it doesn't translate the data to the other system, and of course it doesn't connect with the other system. You have to let something like a Jitterbit know that you're ready to connect or that an event has happened within Salesforce in order to allow us to act in real time. Now, in the past, this was all done through outbound callouts, which were really a function of Salesforce workflow or flow. But now they have a new event bus, and the event bus will essentially, in real time, announce to something like Jitterbit that something has happened within Salesforce, and it allows us to act immediately. Most interesting about events is that not only does it let us know in real time that the event happened, but it will actually queue up that event for 24 hours so that we can go back and see when that event happened, what sequence it happened, and we can take action. Now, I think there's definitely a misnomer among a lot of people at Salesforce who hear that, wow, there's this new event bus. Does that mean that they have middleware? No, Salesforce still does not have integration middleware. What it has is the ability to tell you in real time that something happened in Salesforce and allow an integration platform as a service solution like Jitterbit to then take data from Salesforce, move it to all the multiple systems across the ecosystem, and begin to do our orchestration and to be able to do the integrations themselves. But a very, very exciting new technology that I think really moves them into the next generation of real-time integration. Now, from you, our prospects, the customers, the people who stopped at the booth, we really heard three big topics. The number one topic by far is how do we connect to systems? Obviously, we have a tremendous amount of data in Salesforce, and generally a company stores about 10 to 30% of all of their data in Salesforce. The big question is, how do I access and connect Salesforce to the other 70 to 90% of my enterprise data? And this means connecting to a whole myriad of legacy applications. Some of these applications are 10, 20 years old. Some of them are custom. Some of them are very complex packaged on-premise systems like SAP, Microsoft, and Oracle. And some of them are new SaaS-based systems. But the big issue is that connectivity is that last mile. And that's really what our prospects and customers struggle with the most. Once you've connected to the system, the big question is, how do I then begin to automate and then make my processes intelligent? And then finally, from the most advanced of you who are listening to AI, understand advanced analytics, understand what's happening in terms of machine learning, how do I really infuse AI not just into my Salesforce platforms, but into the overall process? And how do I leverage artificial intelligence engines from all the different arenas within the technology ecosystem? And then we hear, of course, how do I then create and manage APIs within my technical architecture to make it more agile, to decouple my services, and to expose my data and my processes both within my organization and outside my organization. So we heard a lot from you, and that's what we're going to try to cover today in the webinar. Now, there's really two big trends in solution composition, and this is really the newest generation of integration. There's this whole concept of composing platforms, And then there's the concept of really being able to compose individual applications and being able to infuse artificial intelligence into those applications and those processes. Now, the biggest shift that we've seen over the last 24 months within the Salesforce community is really a move away from the idea that a monolithic single platform can actually satisfy the needs of an entire department. Here we give you an example for marketing. It used to be that if I needed a marketing application or to automate my marketing department, I would just simply go out to one of the big marketing platforms, whether that was Pardot, Silverpot, whether it was Marketo, whether that was HubSpot. I would simply buy that platform and then I would deploy or leverage 70, 80, maybe 100% of its functionality. And that would take care of 90 to 100% of my needs. Well, the fact is we have now moved to a world of microservices. We've moved to a world where on the right-hand side, you can see the thousands of services and applications that are now being leveraged by an average marketing department. If we go to a company like Cisco, we see that they are on average using over 70 different applications within the marketing organization. And the way that you connect those applications and the way that you orchestrate those applications in your go-to-market strategy, that's fundamentally what differentiates you in the marketplace. Now, there's a speed and agility angle to this. The whole idea is that how do I connect and orchestrate and compose pre-existing services and best-of-breed applications very rapidly in a matter of a few days to be able to create this new marketing experience for my prospects and customers, as opposed to the old way, which used to be either I'm going to code the entire platform or I might depend on the vendor to code that entire platform. And even in a cloud-based platform, that's still a much slower approach and less agile than just grabbing different components and different services as I need. Now, in order to do this, you need to have the connectivity to those hundreds and even thousands of systems. And that's exactly what we do at Jitterbit. We're very familiar with thousands and thousands of applications because we've done this for well over a decade. And as I mentioned before, these applications range from some of the complex enterprise-grade legacy applications like SAP, Microsoft, IBM, all the way to some of the newest applications that are coming out from the folks at Amazon, and I'll even give credit to the folks at ADP, etc. Now, for those of you who aren't that technical, what's key to understand is that underneath the sheets here, you can see that all of that connectivity is being driven by APIs. Ultimately, if you talk to your Salesforce sales engineer, he's going to tell you that integration with Salesforce is easy because we have an API-first strategy. And indeed, Salesforce's API, and now there's a suite of APIs, are best of breed for the cloud platforms. But it's key to understand that not all APIs are the same. The Salesforce API behaves and is designed completely different than the SAP APIs, completely different than the NetSuite APIs, totally different than the Oracle APIs. And that's what we've really built our business on, is understanding the complexity, understanding the nuances of the most common business APIs out there. We've built native connectors for some of the biggest, most complex. Of course, I mentioned the SAPs and the Microsofts. And of course, being able to connect to the whole new generation of REST-based APIs that have been so common and of course are even easy to use over the last 3 to 5 years. Now, the idea is really being able to go out into the 5 years, the 10 years, the 20 years of application and data infrastructure that you've built up within your IT organization, and be able to access all of that data, be able to bring all of that data into a common central hub like Jitterbit, and then leverage services from the cloud. In this example, we show you NetSuite, but it could be Workday or Taleo or any other cloud-based service, and then really be able to provide delightful experiences to users. And of course, Salesforce remains the core hub of your customer data, and we pull that right in to provide the best and most complete set of information to your employees, your customers, or your partners. Now, we talk about our experience in connecting to these thousands of applications and services out there, and we do that through open integration standards. The most common, of course, is ODBC, JDBC for databases. Traditionally, we had seen a lot of SOAP and web service-based APIs in the traditional enterprise systems, and now really most people are moving towards the RESTful APIs. And of course, we have connectivity around B2B, around EDI, a lot of movement around JSON. The bottom line is that we support all of the open integration standards out there. Once you've established that core connectivity, the key is then really being able to automate processes across any of the major departments in your organization. The most common at Salesforce, of course, sales, service, and marketing, but of course it stretches all the way to HR and operations. A good example of that is that here we have Salesforce, which in this case might be running your entire sales organization. But you might be interacting with a marketing application like Marketo. Marketo is grabbing those leads, qualifying the leads, prioritizing the leads, and then pushing those leads into Salesforce. And then Salesforce, of course, is communicating back with Marketo to let them know what's the status of the leads so that you can execute your marketing journey through the Marketo platform. From something like NetSuite, an ERP or back office solution, we can see that we're passing all of the orders into the accounting system so that we can process the order, we can invoice the customer, and we can ship out the product and then provide the order status back in real time for the sales rep or the service rep who needs to know whether or not the order has been fulfilled. And with an ERP like SAP, we might do things like purchase information and then provide all of the billing information that's coming from that accounting system and make that information available to the sales rep so at least they know whether they got paid for the order and the sale that they did. Now, the second big trend that we see is application and AI composition. And this is really where we're starting to automate and compose discrete processes. Now, in this case, I take all of that legacy data, and I've already connected to all of that legacy data, but I might want to make that information available as a microservice or make that data available as an API to the rest of my organization. I can make this available as a private API so that if people want to get order data within the company, they can simply access the order API or the order microservice and be able to access that data in a safe, secure, scalable, and governed way. I could even take that API and make that available out to my partners, and if it was appropriate, even make it available out to my customers as well. Now, as we move into this new API economy and IT organizations more and more make data available through self-service mechanisms like APIs, the big question is, who's going to build all of those APIs? Who's going to connect to those legacy systems, those enterprise systems, and make that all available? And what's great is that through Jitterbit, we can do that with a simple right click. Now, the idea is that ultimately Jitterbit sits out in the cloud. We're able to pull all of the data from inside the firewall. You can see applications like Siebel, PeopleSoft, Oracle, databases. We're able to access all of the data from SaaS applications like Salesforce and NetSuite and Workday. And then we're able to pull from these big mega vendors like Azure and AWS and Google that are starting to emerge and be able to bring all of that data together and publish that as a composed application or service through an API that can be accessed by developers, it can be accessed by partners, or it can be accessed by analysts within the organization. And the last piece that we're starting to see in terms of integration is APIs are ultimately the glue that are really accelerating artificial intelligence and analytics. Obviously, at Dreamforce, we heard a lot about Einstein, and Einstein has tremendous power. But it's important to understand that going forward, most organizations will not rely on a single source of AI for everything that their companies need. You're going to rely on different companies that provide different levels of artificial intelligence services based on what you need. So we can already see the partnership with IBM. IBM Watson is very good at providing things like weather information, which is simply not provided from Salesforce. Or we might see something like sentiment analysis, where you might leverage Einstein sentiment analysis. You might leverage Watson IBM sentiment analysis, and you might grab Microsoft sentiment analysis, look at what all three engines told you, and then make a decision, because they don't all come up with the exact same answer. Now, the idea here is that we have connected out to that legacy IT environment. We've grabbed all of that data, and once we have all of that data, it's data that powers AI. We've had the AI algorithms for a long time. What we haven't had was the ability to be able to feed the quantity of data that the AI engines and algorithms need in order for them to begin the self-learning process. And now with the tools that are available within Jitterbit, we can feed those AI engines all the information they need. We can feed multiple AI engines simultaneously, bring back all of that analytical insight, and again, manage and make that available as an application, a microservice, or an API. And of course, that then gives the tool for the developers to be able to create those innovative apps. And of course, they do that generally within the Salesforce platform. Now, the ultimate result of all of this is thousands of Salesforce customers that are using Jitterbit every day to connect their enterprises, connect their systems, and to be able to create this new world of API composition. And you can see our customers stretch all the major verticals that you see within the industry. And of course, it's a global customer base with over a third doing their business outside of the United States. Now, we had dozens of customers from Aspect to Odyssey Logistics talking about what they were doing with Jitterbit. But I think what was most exciting was to hear one customer in particular talk about how they're leveraging Jitterbit. And of course, they have an option of over 224 integration tools on the App Exchange. There was one specific customer that was really exciting to hear how they had transformed and continue to transform their business through a rapid growth scenario using application composition, process automation, and connected insights to really make the difference. And that customer was Salesforce.com. So there was actually a session, and at the end of this webinar, we will send out to you guys an email that has a link to the session. I highly recommend everybody take, I think it's about 45 minutes or so. Take a little under an hour of your time and hear how the Salesforce revenue operations team is fundamentally using Jitterbit to change the way they do business. Now, what was exciting to hear from them is that the revenue operations organization headed by Meredith Schmidt, who'd been at Salesforce for well over 15 years, essentially needed to be able to grow revenue operations. And of course, this includes order management. This includes things like commissions. It includes things like the analytics and the reporting, the closing of the quarter. She needs to be able to manage this from, in her story, they were only 300 million when they went public. And today, of course, Salesforce is over a $10 billion organization. So just over the last 5 to 10 years, they had to be able to scale from what was thousands of sales orders and transactions to today processing well over 1.2 million sales transactions. And as they grow 20 to 30% every single year in this rocket ship that we've all witnessed called Salesforce, they needed to be able to automate all of those processes around their sales organization in a way that didn't demand that they increased headcount by 20 to 30%. Indeed, what we hear from Meredith is that she was able to make this ramp up to 1.2 million sales transactions and actually reduce headcount within the revenue operations organization. And actually, when I say reduce headcount, to be clear, she was able to give them other opportunities and actually work into the world of analytics. And I'll talk about that as we go through. Now, what they're essentially doing is they're using Jitterbit to connect the processes of multiple applications. One of the biggest issues that they had, and we see this with a lot of the enterprise customers within the Salesforce ecosystem, is that they had multiple Salesforce instances. They have Org62, but they also have dozens of other Salesforce applications and processes that are running. This creates discrete data that all needs to be connected, synchronized, and automated. They also needed to be able to validate and automate the process of bringing in every single sales order. And when they started the Jitterbit project, they were processing less than 20% of all of their sales orders in an automated and digital way. That meant 80% of what they did was manual. Manual, of course, means lots of labor, but it also means a lot of risk. They've now moved that from 20% automated to 84% automated, which means they're only dealing with less than 20% of their orders in a non-digital fashion. And that's really where they got the efficiency gains. You can see ultimately 1.2 million orders that they're processing annually today. Interesting enough, what we heard from Salesforce, this will grow within the next 4 years to over 3.4 million transactions that will be processed through Jitterbit and Salesforce every single year. So the growth continues. What's interesting now is that you took a process that took hours and sometimes days, and the order fulfillment from the moment that the sales rep puts in the order to the moment that he is notified of what his commission will be is now less than 5 minutes. They were able to activate essentially 29, and what was interesting was during the presentation they corrected 29 to actually 31, because in the 24 hours since they had built the deck and delivered the deck, they had built 2 more integrations for the team. Each one of their operations are taking less than a day to build, so this is a very agile process. We talked earlier about the challenges they faced around operational efficiency and enhancing that order validation. Ultimately, this is a 10 headcount savings over 10 years. The fact is they couldn't continue to add people to the operations side. What they really want to be doing at Salesforce is adding people to the sales side and the service and support side. Now, the journey to integrate Jitterbit that they went through is the same kind of journey that our customers go through. You identify the pattern or the process that needs to be automated. You identify what needs to be connected. You identify the different data sets. Then you build the logic and you test it. You launch the solution. You monitor success. And then you rinse and repeat. To do that, the full process of order management takes less than 2 weeks. And I said they're building a new integration in less than a day. To actually launch that is now taking them less than 2 weeks. So a very agile process. The results are they got 80% of automated orders, saved 5 to 7 headcount just in order management alone. And of course, most important is that they increased the accuracy for their sales organization, which of course is their customers. What's key to understand here is that when we talk about increasing accuracy, that means that they got the commission statements right. And we all know there's no way to turn off your sales reps than to pay them an incorrect amount. And of course, that creates a tremendous amount of work if you have to redo the commissions every quarter after they're paid through. Going forward, they're going to be really pushing these integrations out. They're already global, but moving it to a more global level. They're building out additional use cases. And of course, that ability to adapt and change the processes over time in a weekly basis is absolutely crucial. Now, one of the interesting stories that they tell is not only did they connect and automate the entire sales operations process, but they now have really brought in analytics. And of course, we heard lots about Einstein analytics, but here's the example of Salesforce themselves eating their own dog food and really using their own analytics solution to really understand what's happening in their sales orders. For example, they need to know when people are making quotes, what they're quoting, which products are the most common. But what I thought was most interesting is what were the exceptions? What were the questions around discounts? How often were they providing approvals for discounts across the global marketplace? And you can imagine in a company the size of Salesforce, this is very, very complex analytics that they're dealing with millions and millions of rows of data, and they're running all of that data and connecting all of that data using Jitterbit. Now, the entire process integration, all the connectivity, tying into those different systems, building out the dashboards, took the sales operations team less than 1 month. So very, very impressive work from the beginning to the end. We can see the results in the end. They ultimately power about 5 Einstein analytic dashboards. These dashboards every day are running over 30 different queries. They're processing well over 3 million rows of data, and they save essentially 10 hours per dashboard within the organization every quarter. You can see some of the examples of the dashboards. They see everything that has been quoted. We talk about that case management. A sales rep has to actually execute a case in order to ask for an exception discount approval. They're tracking how their e-signature program is working together with adoption, and of course they want to understand which exceptions are approved, which ones are not approved within which regions. And it all ties into some very sophisticated territory management and budget management processes that they've now used to manage what is one of the largest enterprise sales organizations in the world. In the end, what I think was really interesting to hear from Meredith and her team was they essentially said Salesforce at this point in time could not close its quarter. It could not close its quarter without using the technologies and the services enabled through the Jitterbit platform. So for that, I definitely want to thank the Salesforce team for their time. Again, we'll send you a link out to that session. We'll also send you out some information. There were at least 12 other sessions that you can attend, but we'll send that out as a follow-up to the webinar. What I want to do now is pass it over to Corey. Hopefully a couple of you guys saw Corey. I feel like, Corey, you were probably one of the guys who did, what, 199 of those live demos that we talked about earlier. Let me hand it over to you, and you can show us some of the new capabilities and some of the new demos that you provided during Dreamforce.
Sure thing, Andrew. And yeah, we did a lot of demos while we were out there. Hopefully some of you were there and got to come by the main booth and saw myself and my team showing some of this demo. But if you didn't get a chance to, that's a lot of why we're here. We're going to show you what we showed out there and a lot of how some of this newer technology that Andrew's been talking about really starts to link together with Jitterbit in the middle. And I'm actually going to show you, if we've got the time, I think we do, I'm going to show you kind of 2 different elements here that we showed at the main booth. And the first one of these is really bringing in Jitterbit in more of a sales perspective. Now, we've got a couple different endpoints. You see this on my screen right now, where we've got Salesforce Sales Cloud. Now, obviously, we all know that, but you've got those back-end systems, and we're going to be using NetSuite today for that. But we're also bringing in some newer technologies like Amazon's Alexa device. I'm going to be using an Echo Dot on this particular one, and also messaging systems like Slack. Now, a little bit later, we're going to go into a few others, but let's just start here. Okay, the storyline that this kind of goes through, because obviously everything's just told better in a story, but the storyline is that this is a pool sales and service company. That's going to come into play a little bit later. But this company, we've got sales reps out there. They're working diligently to meet their quotas, but they need communication. And so let's take the scenario that I'm one of these sales reps, and I come in after a few days off and setting up for the morning. I don't want to see kind of, hey, where am I at on sales? Well, wouldn't it be awesome if I can do this just by walking into my office and asking? Well, that's where Amazon Alexa comes in. It can call into a Jitterbit API. And then Jitterbit can go into any backend system, grab whatever data that you want, aggregate it together, do any analytics on it, do anything you want to do, and feed that back to Alexa. So let me show you what one of these looks like here, where we can call into Alexa and say, Alexa, ask Jitterbit how I'm doing on sales. And so Alexa's calling into that Jitterbit API. Jitterbit's going into Salesforce, pulling reports, aggregating that data, and it's going to bring it back to us.
Month to date. You have closed 3 opportunities totaling 43% of your monthly quota.
Okay, so that's not that wonderful. We want to actually get on this a little bit, but you know, here in our world, we use stuff called Slack. We use a Slack communication platform, and here you see it right here. And I've got an ops channel where I can let Alexa call into Jitterbit and be able to just Slack me the information that I need. So let's see what we've got sitting out there. And I'm just going to say, Alexa, ask Jitterbit to send me my 90% ops. So now Alexa's calling in once again. She's going to read some back, but you see it on screen too.
$368. Spring Hill Resort for $6,000.
Okay, perfect. So we've got this Spring Hill Resort opportunity sitting out here. Obviously, we could chase Orlando Golf and Resort, but it's a small op, and we're not doing too great on the month. So let's do a little bit better. So here we go, Spring Hill Resort. We can just follow the link right here, go straight into the Salesforce landing interface, and we can take a look at what's going on here. Now, this is a $6,000 opportunity. Remember, this is a pool sales and service company. The products we've got are 3 commercial service contracts. Now, the commercial service contract here, they must have 3 pools out here, $2,000 each for the service contract, commercial service, so that's fine. But we make the calls, we follow up on it. We've been in negotiation review. That's where it's at, 90% off. And you know, we call them up. They say, "Hey, we got the red lines done. We're ready to move forward. We're ready to close this thing. We're awesome. Let's do this so we can get another opportunity in this month." So we're going to mark it as closed and set the close stage here to closed 1. Now, this, when I click save, is triggering, in this case, a Salesforce platform event. Now, Jitterbit is subscribed to that platform event queue. We're listening for those events, and when we have a closed 1 opportunity come in, we go back, we get all the details, all the product line items, everything tied to this. And we're going to take this back over into our NetSuite instance. Now, if this customer already exists, we're just going to create a sales order. If it doesn't, we're going to create the customer first and then create the sales order. Now, once all of that completes, Jitterbit comes back and always updates because we want to let everybody know what's going on. If we scroll down, you see the fields here for NetSuite sales order. I'm just going to refresh and see if this has made its way back just yet. So here we go with a refresh. I'm going to scroll down. Hasn't made it in yet. We'll refresh again. Sometimes it takes it just a few moments there for everything to make its full circle. And there we have it, NetSuite Sales Order 2001. We have a nice little badge letting us know that, hey, it made it over there. We get our Jitterbit status, order creation successful, everything right here. Let's go show it over in NetSuite though. Remember, this was 3 of our silver service contracts, $2,000 each. We're gonna go take a look. Spring Hill Resort. I'm gonna come over here into my NetSuite instance and just search for Spring Hill. And we'll see if we can find Spring Hill Resort over here in the back-end ERP system. And there it is right there, Spring Hill Resort. And if I come down here to sales, you'll see items purchased right there, quantity 3, total of $6,000. Every bit of that here right in our back-end ERP system. So that's kind of the sales side of things, bringing all this around. But what about bringing in other things like IoT and that artificial intelligence, all of this powered by APIs? This is where we're going to go next, this connected field service side of things, okay? That's what we're looking at now. And again, we're going to use some Alexa and some Slack in here, as well as Salesforce, obviously. But this is where we're going to start doing things like, hey, let's be honest. A lot of people, when they go out there and they have a bad experience, what are they going to do? Are they going to call up your support line and say, hey, I'm so ticked off, this didn't work well, you didn't show up, whatever the case might be? No, they're probably going to go out to Twitter and they're going to complain out there. Let's be honest, a lot of us have done it. So we could either try to mitigate that from a social media perspective, or we could simply embrace it and say, you know what, people are going to put things out on Twitter, let's just bring that in as cases. That's a lot of what we've done here. So the storyline goes that now that this deal has closed, the pool sales and service company, we're calling it Jitter Pools, they're going to go out and they're going to put an IoT device in the pool. It's going to float out there and it's going to monitor things like the pH level and the chlorine level and the temperature and all this. And it's going to call into a Jitterbit API once an hour, 24/7. That data comes in, we pull other data from systems like Weather Underground, and we aggregate all that together and store it in a back-end database. Now, what that does is that gives us the ability to go through and actively monitor this, to proactively respond to things rather than just saying we're going to send a service tech out every Thursday at noon. It doesn't make sense to send a service tech out every Thursday at noon if the pool doesn't need service, so we're going to actively monitor it. And we're going to send a tech out when it's necessary. Now, let's jump back over into Salesforce. And in this case, I'm going to go over here to cases, and I'm going to go into my response queue. Now you know a little bit of the backstory, and what we're going to do is we're going to use Alexa to pull in some tweets going through Jitterbit. Now we would typically set this type of thing up on a schedule, but schedules are kind of hard to see on a demo, so we bring in Alexa for that. So let's go ahead and do this, and then we'll follow up with a story. Alexa, ask Jitterbit to get my tweets. So let's see if she understood here.
I've asked Jitterbit. You should see any updated records shortly.
Perfect. So now Jitterbit's going and getting any tweets that are sitting out there that have mentioned jitter pools. And it's going to pull that in and create cases. So let's refresh, and here's one. Now this came to the response queue. And what this is this is all the tweets that come in that they're positive. They're not complaining. And we just want to make sure that we keep our customers engaged. And so we've got somebody out here monitoring this response queue, and their job is just to respond. That's why it's called the response queue. So let's go out here, take a look at this case. Now this came from Rick Levins from Stonebridge Golf and Resort. Over here you see the tweets. So let me go ahead and move into the tweet, because this is what I want to show you, is this Watson sentiment. The sentiment analysis that came back from Watson on this tweet, jitter pools is amazing, is joy. We can even come down here and see a nice little graphical representation of that. We say, hey, this person's happy. They just need to go to the response queue. Okay, now right here, we don't even have to log into Twitter to do this. Right here inside of Salesforce, we just type our response, hit reply, it hits the Jitterbit API, we do everything on the back end, we post that reply, and look at this. We can open up the tweet and we see it all right there. 4 seconds ago, jitter pools, thanks. So we've got that response going on. Now that's great when you've got the happy customers, but what about when you've got customers that aren't so happy? Well, we probably don't want to rely on somebody that's just monitoring a queue at that point. Hopefully we don't have that many customers that are upset, but we do want to make sure we get to somebody that can do something. Now again, we talked about using Slack already. So what if we use Slack to send a case alert? Now here you see my Slack channel, and once again, I'm going to have Alexa call into Jitterbit to get those tweets. And if we've got one out there that's not very happy, we should get a case alert. And I'll explain it here in just a moment, but let's go ahead and make the call. Alexa, ask Jitterbit to get my tweets. Okay,
Sure.
so
I've asked Jitterbit. You should see any updated records shortly.
okay, perfect. So what's going to happen if one is not happy? Then it's going to go through sentiment analysis, and it's going to create a case in our escalation queue. Anytime something is created in the escalation queue, that triggers a real-time outbound message in this case. So we're using both platform events and outbound messaging on here, but it pulls that in and it sends the alert over to Slack. We see it here, naval-based dive pools. This case has been escalated. This Watson sentiment analysis, anger scored at 59.3825%. They're not happy. No show from Jitterpool, seriously awful service. Everything we need right here, and what we can do is say, hey, you know, let's not waste some time. Let's go ahead and drill into this account and see what might be going on. Let's go look at that real-time data that's coming from the IoT device floating out in the pool. So I'm pulling up the account, and over here on the right here we see the IoT monitoring device, and we can open this up, and now through a Salesforce Connect call through the Jitterbit OData API, we can access that data in our backend database. Now here we see some of the most recent records. I can view all to see some more details. It takes just a minute to load because we do have a lot of data in that database. And this data is not living in Salesforce, it lives in a backend database. And we're using Jitterbit to securely connect and expose that data, again, through Salesforce Connect, paired with a Jitterbit OData API to expose this data. And there we see it. And so we see that this has been updating even this morning. pH level is in great range there. The free chlorine level is good, salt level is good, water temperatures, a little bit cold. We might want to try to upsell them a heater once we get them happy. But hey, let's call the customer now and we say, hey, Steffi, you know, we see that you had a tweet out there. We want to touch base with you, see what's going on. She says, hey, I'm so upset. You guys were supposed to be out here today, and you know, nobody has showed. And we go, well, wait just a minute. Actually, I'm showing everything looks good on your pool. We came out last week to install the IoT device, the monitoring device. Did you understand that our device, it monitors your pool 24/7? So we can send a technician out when something actually needs to happen. We don't go like most other companies do based on a schedule. And she goes, oh, I didn't realize that. My coworker actually set all this up and just told me you guys were supposed to be here today. I'm so sorry for the confusion. So we've cleared this up. The customer's getting happy, we feel, at least from the call, but hopefully the customer's going to go and do a response to that tweet. And so what we can do is, let's come back over here. Now I'm going to open up that escalation queue, and we're going to find this ticket. We're going to find this case. Right here it is, and there you see it. So there's that single tweet. Now hopefully Steffi has gone out and done a response to this. We're going to pull this in now and see. So let's say, Alexa, ask Jitterbit to get my tweets. So once again,
Sorry,
typically,
I don't know that
well,
one.
let's try that one again here. Alexa, ask Jitterbit to get my tweets. There we go.
Sure. I've asked
Much
Jitterbit.
better.
You should see any updated records shortly.
Okay, so again, we typically have this set up on a schedule. You know, you might set this every 60 seconds if you want it to be super aggressive, maybe every 5 minutes. It depends on what your business needs. But I'm going to refresh this now, and what you're going to notice over here on the right-hand side, we see the tweets. Now, there's just one. We'll refresh again, and we'll see if that made it over. And so we're looking for that that reply. There it is. So there we got what we were looking for right here. So we did get a response. Let's go take a look. First thing, let's look at the Watson sentiment. It's now joy, gone from anger to joy. Wouldn't it be awesome if every support case that came into your company could switch in a heartbeat like that? Well, it's not always reality, but this is a great way to show it here. Jitterpools, thanks for reaching out. Jitterpools really is a great company. We see the Watson sentiment here, and of course, we can always respond right here. We don't have to worry about somebody going rogue out on social media. Everything is isolated right here in their Service Cloud instance. Of course, you can go take a look and see the whole chain of messages right here. You get to see all of it. And that's a really cool way of taking a look at how Jitterbit can connect all of these different systems together through things like traditional integration and keeping everything in sync on the back end with the customers and the products that need between the ERP and the Salesforce instance, all over into things like platform events and Salesforce Connect and OData, and bringing in things like IoT. Just so many different things you can connect together. And you might be thinking, that's great, but how does it all happen? That's got to be complex. Well, let me just give you a quick glimpse here, and of course we could always go in deeper on this, but this is our Jitterbit Studio, and this is where every bit of that integration was designed. Everything graphical in nature. We want to connect to Twitter. We want to get dimensions. We want to take that. And down here in this one, this operation, upserting the cases, I'll give you a quick glimpse on this. This is where we map the data over. And so we actually go from that Twitter data structure, and we go into our case data structure. You know, it doesn't really matter, again, what you're connecting to. Anything out there with an API, anything with a backend database, even down to file connectivity, EDI, the list just goes on and on and on what we can connect to. Well, guys, that's kind of what we were showing there at the booth at Dreamforce. Getting to take a look at some of this here on the webinar. I'm so glad you were able to come out, but we've got a few minutes. I'm going to turn this back over to Andrew, and I think we may have some time here for some Q&A. So Andrew, I'll let you lead that. I'll still be here if there's something technical, but guys, I hope you enjoyed it. Andrew, back over to you.
Thanks, Corey. Yeah, Corey, definitely do not go anywhere. I'm already starting to see questions that are going to go directly to you. For any of you guys who are out there in the audience who want to ask questions, drop up to that GoToWebinar control panel. You'll see a section that says questions. Go ahead and just ask your question. If you want to just talk to us one-on-one, you don't want to, ask the public question, as always, feel free to say, please give me a call, and we'll have one of our technical architects actually give you a call and talk to you directly about something, especially if you want to dig into something real nice and technical and meaty. But I'm already seeing a whole stream of questions coming in. So let's go ahead and go for the first one, which was, do you not have connectivity to Oracle SaaS applications, specifically the Sales Cloud? Yeah, Sanjay, actually, we have integration to the vast majority of the Oracle on-premise and SaaS suite. As a matter of fact, we are on the Oracle Marketplace. We are an OPN partner. We also, of course, now that Oracle has acquired NetSuite, we have hundreds and hundreds of NetSuite customers. I think what's key to understand when you talk about integration and solutions that are available both from a large vendor like an Oracle or an SAP or a Microsoft is often they're good at connecting their own systems together, but what they're not very good at doing is connecting their own systems to all the other applications and services and APIs that live outside outside of their ecosystems, and especially that's where we see the highest demand for Oracle. So the short answer is yes, we do support it. Corey, I'm going to give you this one because I think it's it's an open-ended question, but ultimately, let's see, as you aggregate data from all the different legacy systems, how do you standardize data definitions so that you minimize duplication of information or misalignment? Corey, I know that's a big question and there's a lot to it, so I'm going to hand it over to you to kind of give us a few of the best practices.
Yeah, absolutely. And best practices is exactly where it falls, because what that comes down to is the integration design. This is one of the areas where here at Jitterbit, a lot of times we've got a technical team that provides services to help consult with that, to help define what those best practices need to be for your particular integration and your particular organization. Part of this comes that just like you recognize in the question there, your data coming from various systems, it could be very differing, and you might have, particularly I see this a lot with acquisitions, where you end up with, duplicate customer records is a real easy way to look at it. But there's many different approaches. What I will say is, with Jitterbit, we're not an MDM solution to where we like store data and say that we're the master. There's best practices around some of this and doing deduping and some other standardization with that, but it all comes down to a best practices discussion. What I personally like to do, and it's not always possible, I understand that, but what I typically like to do is, if at all possible, I like to say, hey, for our customers, we've got one system that we're going to say that's the master, and we're going to replicate that out to everything else. Maybe for our products, it's a different system, but we can go kind of object by object. Now, that's what I like to do. It's not always possible, I get that, but that's one simple way, and just because of limitation of time, I'll just kind of leave it at that, but we can always go more in depth with you, one-on-one there if necessary.
Perfect. So John was asking, how do you account for training and adoption if every 2 weeks a process might change or a new integration might be put in place? It's an interesting question because the training on Jitterbit actually is, we provide an online training through Corey's team, by the way, that takes about 2 days, and you can take that online, and at the end of that you can build a basic integration. We also have an advanced course, and you'll actually see a number of other courses coming out throughout the year. So the bottom line is that the training is minimal, but the training is really provided for the person who builds the integrations. A lot of times what happens, and especially in the Salesforce story, when we talk about them changing the integrations every week or two, that's all happening behind the scenes. The users of the integrations are ultimately the Salesforce sales professionals, right? The tens of thousands of sales reps they have around the world. They don't actually know that the integrations are changing. They just know that they're getting paid in a more accurate and more timely way, as a small group of individuals within the revenue operations team are making those changes themselves. So it's not a matter of training as much as having a small group of people that can automate those processes, make changes, and of course they do have to be aware of the effect that it might make on the end users of the application. But that's part of the change management of rolling out any new process. Here's a good one, Corey. I'm going to throw it out to you. What's the difference between Salesforce events and the normal outbound message? Is there any difference in the Jitterbit connection between these two features?
Yeah, that really is a great question for people exploring things like platform events or change data control. And yes, there are substantial back-end differences. With outbound messaging, Salesforce simply sends an API call. It's a SOAP API call. It's older technology, still works, but it only goes to a single system, a single API. Now, Jitterbit can listen to that, no issue whatsoever. We can work with that, just fine. When you talk about platform events, and I'll stay with that one there for just a moment, but when you talk about platform events, it's essentially like a message queue. Okay, so if any of you have worked with other message queue systems, it's a very similar type of methodology. It's a pub sub. And what this means is that you can actually set up multiple listeners for that data, which creates a lot of flexibility in what you need to do in your enterprise. You might have Jitterbit listen, you might have Jitterbit listen multiple times, you might have something else listen, but it is different in the way that it is executed. Jitterbit has a special connector just for that to subscribe to those message queues and pull that data in. It is different technology. Ultimately, as far as Jitterbit is concerned, when it gets down to the integration design, we have a call that comes in on both of them. From there, it's very, very, very similar at that point. But the actual technologies of how to get those messages, it is different. There is kind of pro and con, I guess, to both in certain situations, but I will say platform events, it is the way that everything is moving, and it is a really nice, stable technology.
Corey, I've got another one for you. It looks like somebody was watching your demo and is asking, are you using external objects? And a lot of people know that as Salesforce Connect in your demo.
Yeah, and there's one area where I used that. And one of the questions that comes up sometimes with that is, well, what's the difference between something like Jitterbit and Salesforce Connect? And so I'll kind of pair all of that together. The one area of the demo where I used an external object was looking at that IoT device data from the backend database. Okay, so Jitterbit was bringing in that device data, storing it into a backend database, but to see that data in Salesforce, it's a marriage between exposing that data as a Jitterbit OData API and then consuming that through Salesforce Connect. You see, the catch with Salesforce Connect is that it connects to OData APIs. And not every system out there is already exposed as an OData API. Actually, to be honest, very, very few are, and it can be very difficult to do that in many systems. And so that's a great feature set that we added into Jitterbit, was to be able to take and expose backend data as an OData API so that it could be consumed by Salesforce Connect. It's great when you want to see data and possibly do some record level changes, but almost every time I've encountered it, people also need a full integration suite to go with it. So it's a great marriage between the two. Hopefully that answers the question there.
Yeah, Corey, it's interesting that you made that comment. I was asked over and over at Dreamforce, how do you compare to Salesforce's integration tools or Salesforce Connect, or does Salesforce provide middleware or integration capabilities on their own? And I think that's one of the biggest misnomers, is that if you talk to your Salesforce sales team, they'll address integration to say, hey, of course we integrate. We have an API first strategy. We integrate through our API. We have tools like Salesforce Connect. Now you hear things like platform events. It's important to realize that Salesforce is not providing any kind of transformation, any kind of mapping, any kind of translation capability between multiple systems. And most important, they're not providing any connectivity to any other application outside of Salesforce. The only place that there's an exception is that there is a pretty lightweight integration tool between the Salesforce platform and Heroku that they call Heroku Connect. But this is not a full-fledged middleware. So if you want to connect to anything of enterprise class, if you want to do anything at scale, anything outside of the Salesforce ecosystem, that's really where Jitterbit comes in. We work very, very closely with the folks from Salesforce. We actually co-develop a lot of technologies with them. They're actually investors in Jitterbit from the very beginning. But that's exactly what we provide, is that end-level connectivity for folks from Salesforce. So that was probably the biggest confusion I personally felt at the show. How do you manage integrations across environments? This is coming from Dale. Corey, let me hand that over to you. I'll let you try to define what environments mean.
Yeah, and I'll talk kind of two different levels with that. I know we're getting shy on time here, so I'll try to be quick. First, I'll address it from a cloud environment to an on-premise environment. In that type of scenario, your on-premise stuff is secured by a firewall. And so what we do is we don't come in and say, you have to expose port such and such out through your firewall so we can connect in. We don't feel that that's secure at all. And so instead, we have what we call a secure local agent. And you can install that back behind your firewall, installs on any Windows or Linux system. It takes a couple hundred meg, about a 10-minute install, super lightweight, but that provides the secure connectivity. And you can install this in multiple machines and cluster them together for high availability as well. Okay, and so that then gives that connectivity without opening a single port of the firewall. Everything is then instantiated by those local agents, just like a web browser inside the firewall browsing out to Salesforce. So that's one way that we handle it. If it's in the cloud, we have cloud agents, and you can do all your integrations there on the cloud agents. You can connect to cloud and push the data to cloud, however you need to do that. If it's on premise, you can use the local agents. So that's where I'll start with that conversation. But now let me switch over to something that's a little bit different. And how do we manage between, say, a development environment and a production environment? Well, that's really interesting as well, and it pairs in with these agents, because what you can do in Harmony, in Jitterbit Harmony, is you can define various environments. It keeps different versions of your project, one for dev, one prod, QC, production. You can define those however you want. We don't hard code any of that in. So you can define those environments any way that you would like, keep separate versions of the project. You make a transformation change in, say, dev, you want to move it over to test, it's great there. You move it to QC, great there. You deploy it onto production. Every time it goes along the way there, every environment that it moves to, it pulls the credentials in for that environment. And so it's a real nice way to manage that type of scenario where you have those multiple environments, so to speak, of, say, development and production and anything else that you need in the mix. So hopefully that kind of addresses it regardless of which way you were approaching it, whether it's cloud, on-premise, or dev and production. But yeah, that's how we kind of handle that.
Perfect. I've got a handful of questions that we'll tear through real quickly. It looks like Dale was asking whether or not we did real-time versus scheduled. Absolutely. The majority of the integrations we're starting to see today are actually real-time. The majority of the integrations you saw in Corey's demo, by the way, when we talk about platform events, outbound workflow, those are all real-time API integrations that we support. We, of course, also support scheduled integrations, and we've always done that since the very beginning. Let's see. Dale was also asking, if you need complex transformation, is there a coding UI as well? Absolutely. Our goal is to provide a low-code environment where a Salesforce administrator can be able to build and deploy integrations. The examples of the Salesforce revenue operations team, everyone on that panel except for one was not from IT. They were all analysts. They were all business users, and they had learned how to build very complex integrations using Jitterbit. And the vast majority is through the drag and drop interface. But we do provide a very robust coding environment for taking it to that next level and supporting the needs of the integration developers out there. If I'm connecting my company's SaaS applications, what needs to be enabled on our system to work? Stephanie, to be real simple, what we're looking for is a user ID and a password generally for each system that you're going to access. And then you're going to control the security protocols, what can be accessed through the normal user security monitoring system. So we essentially log into the system that allows us to log into the API, and then we can access whatever that user is enabled to access. Let's see, options for data to persist inside Jitterbit. Corey, what are the best options for persisting data?
So typically what we recommend is something outside of Jitterbit. A lot of our customers are very conscious of data security, and so persisting data, it's really not something that we get into very much at all. And we've got certain things like, you could persist credentials, obviously, certain things like that. But as far as actually maintaining data, if it's something that's going to last more than 24 hours, we recommend really a third-party solution there. And again, it's just because we don't really want to get into that side of things from a data security standpoint. We like moving data from point A to point B. We don't necessarily like holding on to the data.
Yep, and of course, Corey, that means they could move that to any database. You could store it with any repository of your own. We just simply do not store our customers' data on our service. We're just seeing all kinds of data privacy issues. We work with hospitals and healthcare, government organizations, and that whole idea of storing data on a vendor's platform is something that really most customers don't want to do. They might do it with Salesforce, but you don't want your integration vendor holding all of your data as well. It just duplicates your risk. All right, last one, speaking of that, is we have clients in the EU. Data protection is top of mind, and it is top of mind for us. As I mentioned, over a third of all of our customers are international. We have very, very large customers throughout EMEA that are now dealing with the new EMEA global data privacy rules. That's one of the reasons that we try not to persist the data. We're very familiar with the law, and we fully abide by it. We can give you information about how to track the data within Jitterbit, monitor it, how we secure it. But yeah, we're completely compliant with the new rules around data privacy from an EMEA perspective. Yeah, so lots of thanks. And Corey, big shout outs, and people really excited about your AI integration. Hard to believe over 500 people on the webinar today, and over 270 of you are still on. And I apologize, we ran 7 minutes over, but a tremendous amount of data that we try to provide to you. Big, big thanks go out, of course, to Corey, but most important to our customers, to our prospects, to the folks at Salesforce.com for throwing out just an incredible event